What if one man's search for meaning could save an entire village? This is the incredible true story of a lonely architect who left everything behind to build not just homes, but hope, and fathered a new future in a forgotten land. Stay with us to witness a journey that will touch your heart and challenge everything you thought about family and community. Before we dive in, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, so you never miss a story that inspires, uplifts, and connects us all. Ethan Ward stood on the rooftop of his Manhattan apartment, the cold wind biting through the thin fabric of his jacket. Below him, the city buzzed with relentless energy, honking cars, shouting vendors, flashing lights. But up here, above it all, there was only silence. A silence so heavy it felt like the weight of every regret he'd ever carried. At 67, Ethan had spent his life designing towers that kissed the clouds, luxury penthouses where the rich and powerful drank champagne and whispered secrets. His name was etched on blueprints from New York to Chicago, yet no one had ever called him father or husband. His family was a collection of faded photographs, his sister gone 2 years ago, a wife lost to time, and no children to call his own. The ache inside him was not new. It had settled there slowly, a hollow gnawing at his chest that no amount of success could fill. As he gazed out at the sprawling city, he realized he was a stranger in a place he had helped shape. The concrete jungles, the steel beams, they were monuments to ambition, but they felt lifeless to him now. His phone buzzed in his pocket, an email from his old architecture firm offering a project in Dubai. He ignored it. For the first time, money and prestige felt meaningless. That night, Ethan packed a small bag with the essentials, a few clothes, a journal, a worn photograph of his sister. He left a note on the kitchen table. "I'm looking for something I lost long ago. If I don't come back, know I tried." He booked a one-way ticket to Indonesia, a place he'd never been but that had called to him in dreams for months. He didn't know what awaited him, only that staying in New York meant fading into a quiet, lonely death. Days later, he found himself trekking through the thick jungles and towering mountains of a remote Indonesian island. The air was thick with humidity, the scent of earth and blooming flowers heavy in his lungs. Each step was a struggle, his age, his city-worn body not used to such wild terrain. Yet, for the first time in decades, he felt something unfamiliar, hope. But hope is fragile. On the fourth day, as clouds rolled in overhead and the first drops of rain began to fall, Ethan slipped on a moss-covered rock. His ankle twisted sharply. Pain exploded through his leg, and he collapsed onto the damp earth, unable to move. The jungle around him was alive with sounds, chirping insects, distant calls of birds, but no human voice. Hours passed. Darkness began to fall. His breath came in shallow gasps as he lay there, shivering, cold seeping through his clothes. The ache in his ankle was nothing compared to the loneliness clawing at his soul. Just as despair threatened to swallow him whole, a soft voice broke through the night. "Sir? Are you all right?" A figure appeared through the thick ferns, a young woman with kind eyes and steady hands. She introduced herself as Anaya and gently lifted him to her feet. "Come," she said, "you are not safe here alone." Ethan wanted to speak, to ask questions, but his voice was barely a whisper. As Anaya carried him through the darkness, Ethan felt a strange warmth growing inside him. For the first time in a long while, he was not alone. And though he didn't know it yet, this moment would change everything. The first light of dawn filtered softly through the thin wooden slats of the small hut where Ethan lay resting. The scent of damp earth and wood smoke mingled in the cool morning air. He blinked slowly, adjusting to the unfamiliar surroundings, simple walls, woven mats, and a small fire crackling gently in the corner. Anaya was there, seated quietly beside him. Her dark eyes held a calm strength, the kind that came from a life lived close to the rhythms of nature, far from the hurried chaos Ethan had left behind. She smiled faintly when she noticed his eyes flutter open, offering him a cup of warm tea brewed from local herbs. "You are safe now," she said softly, her voice a gentle melody in the stillness. Ethan tried to sit up, wincing as a sharp pain radiated from his injured ankle. Anaya quickly helped him settle back down, her hands steady and caring. Over the next few days, Ethan's strength slowly returned. As his body healed, so too did his mind begin to awaken to the world around him, a world so starkly different from towering skyscrapers and endless streets. Here, the mountains loomed like ancient guardians, draped in thick green blankets of jungle. The air was filled with the chatter of birds, the rustle of leaves, and the faint murmur of a nearby river. But it was the people that captivated him most. The village, Anaya explained, was called Sembara. Nestled in a remote mountain valley, it was home to just over 100 souls, all women, and a few children. The men, she said quietly, had left years ago in search of work, some never to return. Those who stayed behind had fallen ill or passed on. Ethan found himself wandering the dusty paths alongside Anaya, meeting the women who eyed him with a mix of curiosity, caution, and something deeper, perhaps hope. There was Lila, an elder with silver-streaked hair and eyes that seemed to hold centuries of sorrow. She spoke little, but when she did, her words carried the weight of the village's collective memory. There were once many men here, she told Ethan one afternoon as they sat beneath the shade of a banyan tree. Strong hands to till the fields, strong hearts to protect. But the mountain took them from us, or they left for a world too far away. Ethan listened, feeling the ache of absence in her voice. He noticed how the women worked tirelessly, balancing farming, child-rearing, and village leadership without respite. Their smiles were bright, but their eyes told stories of loneliness and resilience. The children played in small groups, their laughter echoing like fragile bubbles of joy. Yet Ethan saw the questions they carried, the ones adults refused to answer. Where were the fathers? Who would teach them to become men, husbands, leaders? The unspoken fear of a future without continuity hovered over Sembara like a thick fog. At night, Ethan lay awake on the wooden floor of his small room, the sounds of the village quiet but persistent, the soft weeping of a child, the whispered prayers of women, the distant call of an owl. He thought of his own life back in New York, where he had built towering monuments yet felt profoundly empty. Here, surrounded by these women and children, his heart stirred with a yearning he had long suppressed. Anaya visited him often, bringing fresh fruit or water, sometimes just sitting silently by his side. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the jagged peaks, she shared more of the village's story. Without men, the village withers, she said softly. Our daughters will grow up without guidance. Our elders will pass with no one to remember them. We survive, but barely. Ethan's mind raced. The practical part of him, the architect, started imagining solutions, irrigation systems, workshops, marketplaces. But the deeper, more urgent problem was clear. The village needed more than tools and trade. It needed life. That night, as stars glittered coldly overhead, Ethan made a decision. He would not be a passing stranger here. He would stay and help, in any way he could. Because for the first time in years, Ethan felt the faint, fragile bloom of belonging. The days in Sembara began to take on a rhythm that Ethan hadn't known in years. The hum of nature, the soft murmur of women working side by side, and the laughter of children weaving through the fields became the new soundtrack of his life. Yet beneath the surface of this simple beauty lay a quiet urgency, one that Ethan, with his keen eyes and practiced mind, quickly understood. He watched as women labored from dawn until dusk, tending to the cracked, thirsty soil, trying to coax life from the earth with bare hands and outdated tools. The irrigation channels were clogged or broken, and the crops struggled under the weight of the long dry seasons. Without water, the village's fragile existence hung by a thread. One morning, after a breakfast of fresh mango and rice, Ethan stood before a gathering of village women. Their faces were lined by years of hardship, but their eyes held a spark, a cautious hope that this outsider might bring change. Ethan unfurled a crude map he'd drawn in the dirt with a stick, blueprints born from years of architectural precision but adapted to this land's humble needs. We can rebuild the water system, he said gently, tracing finger paths over the sketch. If we channel the mountain streams into the fields, we can water more crops, grow more food, and ease the daily struggle. The women exchanged glances. Anaya nodded thoughtfully. We have the labor and the will, she said. If you lead, we will follow. Over the next weeks, Ethan became more than a guest. He was a teacher and a builder, rolling up his sleeves alongside the women of Sembara. They repaired ancient stone canals, dug new trenches, and constructed wooden sluices to guide the water. At first, the work was exhausting, and the mountain sun beat down mercilessly. But as water began to flow again, sparkling and clear, a wave of pride swept through the village. Look! A woman exclaimed one morning, pointing to the verdant fields flourishing where once was dust. Children ran barefoot through the irrigation ditches, their laughter ringing like bells. But Ethan knew that irrigation alone would not save Sembara. The women, skilled in weaving and crafting beautiful textiles, had no market beyond the valley's borders. Their art, rich with culture and history, was hidden from the world. Using an old laptop powered by a solar panel Anaya had salvaged, Ethan began teaching a group of young women the basics of the internet, email, and online marketplaces. Your work deserves to be seen, he told them. There are people who will pay for these fabrics, for your stories woven in thread. Days turned into weeks as they worked to photograph, list, and send their crafts to distant cities and countries. The first orders trickled in, small but significant. For the first time, the women of Sambara felt the thrill of connection, a lifeline to a world that had long forgotten them. One evening, as the village gathered around a fire to celebrate their hard work, Lila raised her cup of sweet tea and looked at Ethan with gratitude shining in her eyes. You have given us more than water and trade, she said softly. You have given us hope. Ethan smiled, but his heart was heavy. He knew the village's deepest wounds were not only economic or physical, they were wounds of absence and longing. The lack of young men, of sons and brothers to carry forward the legacy. As the firelight flickered across the faces of the women and children, Ethan silently vowed to find a way to breathe new life into Sambara's future. The blueprints of hope were only just beginning. The village of Sambara had begun to stir with a new vitality. Green fields stretched farther than they had in decades, and the hum of eager voices filled the air as women learned to navigate the digital world and send their crafts beyond the mountains. But beneath this fragile renewal, an unspoken tension lingered, one that hovered like a shadow no one dared to name aloud. Ethan felt it keenly. The smiles were bright, the laughter frequent, yet in quiet moments, when the sun dipped low and the village settled into evening calm, a weight pressed heavily on the hearts around him. One evening, as the golden light softened, Anaya invited Ethan to walk with her along a narrow path that wound through rice paddies shimmering in the twilight. The air was rich with the scent of wet earth and blooming jasmine. Ethan, she began hesitantly, her eyes downcast, there is something you must understand about this village. About us. He looked at her, sensing the gravity behind her words. We are strong, she said, and we have survived without men for many years. But survival is not the same as living. Ethan remained silent, urging her gently to continue. In this village, Anaya said, voice trembling, our daughters grow without fathers. Our sons, they do not exist here. The men who left, many never returned. Some lost to the sea, some to other lands, some to silence. She paused, swallowing a lump in her throat. The absence of men is not just about bodies missing, she whispered. It is about stories left untold, traditions broken, and futures that feel impossible. Ethan felt a pang deep in his chest, a pain he recognized, one born of absence and longing. He knew well what it was to feel incomplete, to have pieces missing from the tapestry of life. That night, Ethan lay awake on the simple wooden floor of his room, the moonlight casting pale shadows through the window. The distant call of night birds was a haunting lullaby. His thoughts swirled with images of the village, the tireless women, the children growing up with questions they could not voice. He remembered the questions he had asked himself for years back in New York. What is the meaning of a life without connection? Without legacy? In Sambara, the answer was all around him, visible in the worn hands of mothers, in the hesitant smiles of girls longing for guidance, in the quiet sorrow of elders who feared their stories would vanish with them. The next morning, as Ethan sat with Anaya and a small group of women, the conversation turned to the future. Voices were low but earnest. We teach our girls to be strong, but how do we prepare them for a world where men no longer walk beside them? One woman asked. How do we ensure the village does not fade away when we are gone? Another whispered. Ethan listened, feeling the enormity of their unspoken needs. He understood now that water and commerce were only part of the solution. What Sambara needed was a rebirth, a way to restore not just its economy, but its soul. That afternoon, Ethan retreated to the small hut he now called home. He pulled out a blank page in his journal and began to write. A village without men is like a book with missing chapters. To build a future, we must write new stories together. As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky with hues of pink and orange, Ethan made a silent vow. He would find a way to help Sambara not just survive, but truly live again. Days passed with an undercurrent of tension woven through the village's renewed energy. While the crops thrived and the marketplace buzzed with newfound purpose, Ethan sensed a growing restlessness in the eyes of the women around him. Their smiles still carried strength, but shadows flickered beneath, a quiet yearning no irrigation system or online shop could satisfy. One humid afternoon, Ethan stood in the village square, the warm sun filtering through the thick canopy above. Around him gathered a crowd of women, some wary, some curious, others quietly hopeful. Children played nearby, their laughter a soft counterpoint to the serious faces watching him. Ethan's heart pounded as he stepped forward. This moment had been brewing in his mind like a storm, heavy with risk and possibility. "I have lived many years," he began, voice steady but gentle, "and in all that time, I have searched for meaning beyond the things I built. I came here to find a new purpose. But now I realize that Sambara needs more than water, more than markets. It needs life. It needs family." He paused, feeling the weight of his words hang in the air. "I cannot replace what has been lost," he continued. "I do not seek to command or to impose. But if any among you feel, as I do, that this village deserves a chance to grow again, if any of you wish to build families, to raise children, to forge a future, I am here. I will stand with you." A hush fell over the crowd. The only sounds were the distant rustling of leaves and the gentle babble of a nearby stream. Ethan's eyes scanned the faces before him, women who had survived loss and loneliness with fierce dignity, now confronted with a proposal so delicate, so profound, it could reshape everything. At first, no one spoke. The silence was almost unbearable. Then slowly, a hand rose. It was Anaya. Her eyes met Ethan's, steady and resolute. "I will stand with you," she said simply. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Another hand lifted, then another. 25 women in total stepped forward, each with her own story, her own reasons for choosing hope over fear. Later, Ethan sat beneath the banyan tree with Anaya and Lila, the village elder. "Why do you think they chose you?" Ethan asked, the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. Lila smiled softly, eyes misty. "Because you offer something rare, presence. Not pity, not obligation, but willingness. That is enough to plant a seed." That night, Ethan lay awake, the moon casting silver light through the window. His heart swelled with a mixture of awe, gratitude, and fear. Could he bear the responsibility? Could he truly become the man this village needed, not just a helper, but a father? As the first stars appeared in the dark sky, Ethan whispered a vow to himself and to Sambara. "I will do everything I can to nurture this fragile new life, for them, for me, for the future." The air in Sambara had shifted. What was once a village on the brink of fading into silence, now pulsed with life and promise. Ethan, once a stranger with nothing but his hands and heart, had become the steady anchor in a sea of hope and renewal. The birth of the first child was met with a quiet, trembling joy. Anaya, radiant and exhausted, cradled her newborn son in the soft morning light. The village gathered in hushed reverence, as if the child's first cry had awakened something long dormant within them all. That cry echoed not just through the narrow paths and terraced fields, but deep into the very soul of Sambara. Ethan stood nearby, overwhelmed by a flood of emotions. He had seen cities rise and fall, but never had he witnessed such fragile, fierce beauty, the beginning of life against all odds, the tangible proof that their courage could rewrite the future. In the weeks and months that followed, babies arrived one after another, each new life a defiant declaration against despair. Mothers, once weary and guarded, now glowed with a fierce pride. Fathers' hands, unfamiliar yet gentle, guided tiny fingers as they grasped for the world. Ethan's days were filled with new rituals, late nights soothing cries, mornings teaching children to crawl through the warm grass, afternoons watching little feet kick joyfully in the mud. His hair had begun to silver, his face marked by lines carved from years of both solitude and newfound love. But fatherhood was not without its challenges. Many nights Ethan lay awake listening to the village hush in the dark, worried whether he was enough, not just as a man, but as a pillar for this fragile community. Could he give them roots strong enough to hold against the storms to come? With the children came new needs: education, healthcare, safety. The old schoolhouse, cracked and forgotten, was reborn through the village's hands and Ethan's guidance. With bamboo, wood, and borrowed knowledge, they built classrooms filled with light and hope. Anaya, now a mother herself, taught the first generation to read and write, while others learned the skills Ethan introduced: building, agriculture, commerce. A small clinic was established, its walls adorned with colorful paintings by the children, brightening the once somber space. Evenings were marked by the warm glow of firelight, where stories were shared, tales of ancestors, of dreams, of the village's past and future. Ethan would listen, sometimes speaking softly of his own life, a bridge between worlds. The village had transformed. Where once there was uncertainty, there was laughter. Where there had been silence, there was song. And though the journey was far from over, the seed planted months ago had begun to bloom. Ethan often stood on a small hill overlooking Sambara, watching children chase one another beneath the shade of ancient trees. He felt a quiet peace settle within him, a sense that he was finally part of something bigger than any building or blueprint. In the gentle hum of the village, its rebirth, Ethan had found what he had been searching for all along: family, belonging, and the hope that life could always begin again. 20 years had passed since Ethan Ward first set foot in the mountain village of Sambara, a place once silent and fading, now brimming with life. The air carried a vibrant energy, the laughter of children running through green fields, the rhythmic hum of weaving looms, and the murmur of lessons taught beneath the shade of ancient trees. Ethan, now a man weathered by time but filled with quiet strength, walked slowly through the village paths. His hair was silver, and deep lines marked his face, but his eyes still shone with the same gentle fire that had ignited so long ago. He was no longer just an architect or a stranger. He was a father, not to one, but to dozens of children who called him Aya. Among them was Kieran, his eldest son, now a young man of 22. Kieran bore the physical resemblance to Ethan, the same thoughtful eyes and strong jawline, but there was something heavier shadowing his presence. Unlike his father, who embraced the village and its hopes with open arms, Kieran carried a quiet burden, a hesitance that clung to his every step. As Kieran sat beneath the sprawling branches of the banyan tree, watching a group of children learning to read, his mind churned with doubts and fears. He was poised to leave Sambara and study architecture in the city, following in his father's footsteps, but his heart wavered. What did it mean to be Ethan's son? Could he ever live up to the legacy his father had built from nothing? Could he carry the weight of a village's rebirth on his shoulders? Kieran's mother, Anaya, noticed the tension in her son's eyes. One evening, as the village settled into quiet, she found him staring out at the horizon, the setting sun casting long shadows across the fields. "Your heart is heavy," she said softly, sitting beside him. Kieran sighed, voice low. "I love this village. I love you and Aya. But I fear I am not enough. Father built everything here, the water, the homes, the school. What can I do that's worthy of that?" Anaya smiled gently, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You carry a different gift, Kieran. Your father built with his hands and vision, but you build with your heart and mind. The village needs both." Meanwhile, Ethan watched from a distance, sensing the turmoil in his son. He remembered his own journey, the loneliness, the fear of not belonging, the struggle to find purpose late in life. He understood better than anyone how daunting it was to stand in a shadow so vast. One afternoon, Ethan found Kieran at the edge of the forest, where the first wildflowers of spring were blooming. Sitting beside him, Ethan spoke without preamble. "Kieran," he said quietly, "I did not build this village alone. The women, the children, the earth itself, all played their part. My role was just a piece of a larger story." Kieran looked at his father, searching his face. "You don't have to carry my legacy," Ethan continued. "You must find your own. That is the true strength. The village will follow the son it believes in, not the father it remembers." Tears welled in Kieran's eyes, a mixture of relief and resolve. For the first time, he felt the heavy shadow lift, replaced by a quiet flame. That night, Kieran lay awake, imagining his future, not as Ethan's son, but as Kieran, a young man with dreams of building bridges between Sambara and the world beyond. He envisioned schools with computers, clean water for every home, voices of his people heard far beyond the mountains. The village had given Ethan a new life. Now it was Kieran's turn to shape its future, not under a shadow, but in his own bright light. The news traveled faster than the mountain winds that swept through Sambara. Cameras, microphones, and strangers arrived unannounced, turning the once quiet village into a buzzing spectacle. Journalists from faraway cities, New York, London, Jakarta, had come to capture the story of Ethan Ward, the American who had not only found himself in Sambara but had reshaped an entire community. Ethan stood at the center of it all, feeling a strange mix of pride and discomfort. He was no stranger to attention. His past life in architecture had put him in the spotlight, but this was different. Here, the stakes were deeper. This was not about buildings or blueprints. It was about the lives, hopes, and dreams of hundreds of people who had fought against oblivion. The cameras followed him as he walked through the village, now vibrant and alive with children's laughter and women working side by side in bustling workshops. Reporters asked questions, some curious, some skeptical, some even critical. "Is it true you fathered dozens of children here?" one asked bluntly. "Yes," Ethan replied calmly, "and I'm proud of every one of them." But not everyone was pleased. Critics in the media questioned the ethics of his actions. Was this a man exploiting vulnerable women? Was this a form of cultural imperialism disguised as charity? One headline blared, "The American Savior or the Colonialist?" Inside Sambara, the mood was tense. The women who had opened their hearts to Ethan felt the sting of scrutiny, but stood firmly united. Anaya, now a respected leader in the community, addressed a group of villagers gathered beneath the banyan tree. "He never came to take from us," she said, voice steady and clear. "He came to stay. To build with us, not over us." During an interview, Ethan spoke about the delicate balance of humility and responsibility. "I did not come here to save anyone," he said. "I came because I was lost, and in finding Sambara, I found purpose. This village is not mine alone. It belongs to every woman, every child who has refused to give up." Kieran, now grown and confident in his own path, joined his father in welcoming visitors. He spoke passionately about education, technology, and connecting Sambara to the wider world without losing its soul. In quiet moments away from the cameras, Ethan sat with Anaya, reflecting on how far they had come. "Do you think the world will understand?" he asked. Anaya smiled softly. "Maybe not all. But those who listen with their hearts already do." As night fell, the village gathered for a communal feast, a celebration of resilience and unity. Lanterns flickered in the gentle breeze, illuminating faces weathered by hardship but glowing with hope. Ethan looked around at the scene. Children dancing, women sharing stories, men who had returned to the village to raise families alongside their mothers and sisters. This was the true story, far richer than any headline. The world was watching now. But for Ethan and Sambara, this was only the beginning. Years had passed since the cameras left Sambara and the world's gaze shifted elsewhere, but the village itself thrived quietly, steadily. The relentless energy of rebirth had settled into the deep roots of daily life, the gentle routines of planting, teaching, celebrating, and growing together. Ethan Ward, once the restless architect who sought meaning among skyscrapers, now found himself walking more slowly. His steps were measured, his breath steady, but his mind remained alive with visions and memories as vivid as the mountain air. One early morning, Ethan stood on the ridge overlooking Sambara. The valley below stretched wide and green, dotted with the colorful roofs of homes built by hands he once guided. Children played near the river's edge, their laughter mingling with the song of the wind through the tall grasses. In his hand, Ethan held a simple notebook, worn, its pages filled with sketches, notes, and dreams. It was his last blueprint, not for a building, but for the future of Sambara. Unlike the architectural plans of his youth, this blueprint was drawn with a different kind of ink, the ink of legacy, of hope, and of love. Inside the pages were plans for schools that embraced new technology while honoring tradition, health clinics that cared for body and spirit, community centers where stories would be shared for generations to come. Every line represented not just structure, but connection, a framework for a life that would outlast him. Ethan's eyes wandered to the schoolyard where his eldest son, Kieran, now a leader in his own right, taught children about the world beyond the mountains. Ethan's heart swelled with quiet pride. The son who once feared his shadow had grown into a beacon of light. Yet, even as he savored the present, Ethan knew his time was drawing near. The weight of years pressed gently but firmly upon him. His hands trembled slightly as he closed the notebook, a bittersweet smile touching his lips. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the peaks, Ethan sat beside Anaya under the same banyan tree where he had first proposed a new future for the village. Their hands intertwined, sharing a comfort that words could never fully capture. "We built more than a village," Ethan whispered. "We built a family. A home. A legacy." Anaya nodded, eyes shining with unshed tears. "And it will carry on long after we are gone." In the quiet of that twilight, Ethan wrote one last letter, a message to the children of Sambara yet to be born. "I came here to disappear into the mountains, but instead I became part of a story far greater than myself. May you build your own dreams, stronger than any blueprint I ever drew. Live fully, love deeply, and always remember where you came from." As stars emerged one by one in the darkening sky, Ethan felt a peace he had never known. The last blueprint was not a plan for a structure, but a testament to a life well lived, a final gift to the village that had given him everything. The morning sun rose gently over Sambara, casting a golden glow across the lush valley and illuminating the village that had been reborn from dust and silence. Birds chirped their melodies, and the soft murmur of daily life began anew, children's laughter, women tending gardens, the rhythmic pounding of looms. But beneath the surface of this vibrant day, a profound stillness lingered. Ethan Ward, the man who had become the heartbeat of Sambara, had passed away during the quiet hours of the night. The village awoke to the news with heavy hearts, mourning the loss of their beloved Aya, their father, mentor, and friend. For 3 days, the village fell silent. The usual sounds of work and play were replaced by quiet footsteps and whispered prayers. Doors remained closed, and even the children, sensing the weight of sorrow, stayed close to their mothers and elders. Yet, as the sun climbed higher on the 3rd day, a gathering began at the village square beneath the towering banyan tree, a place that had witnessed countless milestones, celebrations, and tears. Women, men, and children formed a circle, their faces marked with grief but shining with resolve. Anaya stepped forward, her voice steady and clear as she addressed the crowd. Ethan gave us more than water and walls. He gave us hope, family, and a future. Today, we honor him not with silence, but with gratitude. The villagers began to sing, a song of resilience passed down through generations, now infused with new meaning. Their voices rose in harmony, a tapestry of sorrow and celebration woven into every note. Children carried lanterns shaped like stars, symbolizing the light Ethan had kindled in their lives. Mothers held their babies close, a living testament to the new beginnings he had helped create. Elders shared stories of hardship and triumph, reminding all that legacy is not only in stone or wood but in the hearts we touch. A marble stone was placed in the center of the square, engraved with words that would forever echo in Sambara. Here lived a man who gave, not to be remembered, but to keep others alive. As the ceremony drew to a close, Kiran, now a man fully embraced by his community and confident in his path, spoke to those gathered. "My father built this village with his hands. I will build its future with my heart. We are the living legacy of his love and vision. Let us carry it forward together." That evening, as the village settled under a blanket of stars, the firelight danced on faces young and old. The story of Ethan Ward, the man who came seeking peace and found a family, had become a legend, not of one life alone, but of many intertwined. Sambara was no longer just a village. It was a testament to the power of hope, courage, and the unbreakable bonds of community. And in that legacy, Ethan's spirit would live on, forever part of the land, the people, and the dreams that would continue to grow. Ethan's story reminds us that sometimes, the greatest legacies aren't monuments or fame, but the lives we touch and the love we share. From a village on the brink of extinction to a thriving community bursting with life, this journey proves that hope can bloom anywhere, when we dare to care. What would you do if you had the chance to rewrite the future? Thank you for watching this extraordinary tale of courage, resilience, and love. If this story moved you, please like, share, and don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories from around the world. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe and join our community. Together, let's discover more incredible journeys that remind us of the power of hope and human kindness. See you in the next video.